Hello and welcome back to my RC channel. I'm Andy RC and today I'm going to be checking out the Aurora RC QAV105 and I've been looking forward to this model for quite some time. As you can see, it is a shrunken down QAV R style model, so very similar to the Impulse RC Alien, the Martian frame and also the Ishin Wizard, but of course it is a miniature version of it, so it's a 105mm frame. It's a brushless micro with some very interesting specifications, and it's also really cheap as well. And at the making of this video, it's currently the cheapest on GearBest, so I'll leave a link in the description for that. So let's take a look at the specifications. One of the main attractions is the camera. So this is the Runcam Micro Swift. And a lot of these micros have been released lately with this camera and they've been really expensive, like at the £200 mark. This one of the cheapest, so I think that's really attractive. So the frame is 2mm carbon, so fairly strong. The motors, they are Aurora RC branded and they are 1105 7000 kV brushless motors. The propellers are also interesting because, as you can see, they look like gem fans, but they're not. I think they're actually the Racer Star brand and they're a bigger prop. They are a 2435, so 2.4 inch. So we're going to be getting more thrust out of these than we do the gem fans. Now, the props don't come attached to the model out of the box. You have to put them on yourselves, but they do come with these screws here, and you get a spare set of those in the package and a spare set of screws, which is nice as well. So then we have got the 4-in-1 ESC board and flight controller, and this is the same setup as the awesome F100. So they are 10 amp BL Halley S ESCs, and then it's an omnibus flight controller with a built-in VTX, a 25 milliwatt 48 channel VTX, and then we've got a sleeve dipole antenna coming out of the back there, and that connects directly to the flight controller. And just as the F100 had, it has this sort of adhesive on here, like a silicone, and it comes off really easily. It doesn't really do that much, so you have to be very careful with this coming off. And you'll notice here I've got a buzzer. Now, it doesn't come with a buzzer attached out of the box. This is something that I've added. By the way, do not add a buzzer like this. This is just something that I have done so that I can go out a little bit further when I'm doing testing with it and flying it. The best thing to do would be to add the buzzer on a cable there. So yeah, you've got a B plus and a B minus on there for your buzzer. It would have been really nice if it came with a buzzer out of the box, but it doesn't. So another problem that I've had with this model is this was the FreeSky version, so it comes with a D8 receiver, and sadly the receiver seems to be not working. It just won't bind whatsoever, and I've had this a couple of times with these tiny D8 receivers. This one specifically, I did check whether it was soldered up correctly, and it is. You can see there that S-bus is on this top wire here, but whatever I did, it just would not bind in D8 mode. Like I say, I've had a couple of these receivers do that, so I have put an XM on here instead. It's just a little 4-pin 1mm pitch JST, and that just goes in there, no problem. The instructions, actually, you don't get given any instructions, but on GearBest website they link to an instruction manual that does tell you all of the outputs on this control. It's interesting configuration. As you can see, it's a rectangle here. I know a lot of people will be thinking, can I put a Runcam split on here? I would say not, because of the mounting situation, and I think it'd be too heavy as well. So speaking of weight, it is a very light model. It weighs 57 grams without a battery, and then just under 100 grams of the 3-cell battery. So yes, they are giving permission to use a 2 to 3S battery with this one, and it doesn't come with a battery, so there's that to bear in mind when looking at the price of it. Now, when I got this out of the box, it had this rubber band up the top here, and the idea they have is just like the QAV series, is to run the battery on the top, which I think is a really cute idea, but it's not very practical because when the battery sits on the top like that, it's going to completely cover this antenna. So what I've done is I've rerouted the battery band underneath here, and that's pretty easy to do because we just have to take this top off here. I had to do it anyways to get at the receiver, and then the motors just unplug just like the Awesome series. So those just unplug, and I could feed this band underneath here, and then the battery's going to sit underneath. Yeah, it's not as authentic, but I would rather have the practicality of having my antenna free than having the battery in the way of it. But I'm sure you'll get a good result if you fly it like that out of the box. You'll also notice that I've added a little cable tie as well. This is just for the XM receiver's antenna to go up there, because it's quite a long antenna compared to the one that you get here. So to control the VTX, it's exactly the same as the Awesome F100. We have this button here, and then you've got 2 lights at the back. One flashes red, and that is for the bands, and then one flashes blue, and that's for the individual channels. So to control it, you actually have to press this button down for a couple of seconds, and then the red light will just flash on its own. So if it flashes once, it's band A, flashes twice, band B, flashes 3 times, band C, etc. And then if you hold the button down for another couple of seconds, then the blue light will flash, and then you've got your 8 individual channels. So this one came flashed with Betaflight version 3.17. It's not the latest anymore, so you might want to flash it with version 3.2, specifically if you do not plan to add a buzzer, because on version 3.2 now you can actually set the buzzer up as a D-shot command, and that sort of makes the motors twitch just like it does when you boot up. But personally, I prefer to use a actual buzzer myself, because it's going to be a lot louder and it's not actually causing any damage to your motors when they're twitching like that. And you can also use it as a low voltage alarm, even though there's a built-in on-screen display on this as well. So yeah, Betaflight on-screen display in there, and it comes flashed exactly the same as the Awesome board did. So it's got a load of switches enabled to turn the on-screen display off. I've disabled all that, so I've just got my arming on a 2-position switch, and that's on the AUX 2, and then I've got the modes set up on the AUX 1 on a 3-position switch, and that is set up for angle, horizon and acro, and I've just stuck air mode on there as well. And then I've changed the PIDs, and I've also changed the rate. So I've set the RC rate to 1 and my super rate to 0.8. That's just something that I like to do. And then it's set up for D-Shot 600 out of the box. I've put the craft name in there, and I've changed some things around on the on-screen display. Other than that, there actually wasn't a lot of setup that needed to be changed. I bumped up the idle to about 7%, the digital idle, so that we don't get any flips of death or anything like that. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about this model. I already know I like this camera. You can change the camera angle quite easily as well. We've got some screws here, and they are just a Phillips screw, so quite easy to change. You don't need a hex driver. I would have liked to have seen a beeper put on this out of the box, because it supports it, and it's a real shame that the receiver came dead out of the box, but I wouldn't look too much into that because I've had a few of these die on me, so I guess they just didn't test that it would bind when they built it. One thing that I want to mention though is it's interesting that they're saying you can use a 2 to 3S battery with this model, because the Awesome model, they strictly said 2S. And I've done a little bit of a hover in the house with this 3S battery and the motors get very warm, so I actually think that 1105 7000 kV motors and just a 10 amp ESC board might be a little bit under spec for a 3S battery, but they've given permission to fly it on that, so that's what I'm going to do. So strength wise, the only thing that I'm concerned about really is the top plate. This one is just 1 mil thick, but we do have these aluminium standoffs here, and because it's a smaller model, I can't say that we would need more standoffs in the middle there, but I would say that if there is a weakness, then it's going to be this top board here. So what else do you get in the package? Well, not a lot. Like I say, we get a spare set of these props and screws. You get given a spare rubber band for the battery, and that's about it. It comes in this Aurora box here, and you would have to take the props off to put it back in that box. Okay, let's go for a takeoff. Starting off in angle mode. Now, we're just at the tail end of 50 mph winds here, so let's see how it performs. It's getting blown around a little bit. Let's check out the punch on a 3S. Wow. That's pretty crazy. Reminds me of the power from the Leader 120. That is nuts. But what I want to do is just bring it in for a landing and see how hot those motors are getting. Although it's pretty chilly here today. But let's just have a feel. Not even warm, but they were getting warm in the house, so that's something to bear in mind. But yeah, it's chilly here, so that's probably going to have an effect on the motors and cool them down. That's so much power. Be interesting to see what that FPV feed is like. So if I remember correctly, the Awesome series, the VTX had like a couple of lines on it every now and then. Now that could have been the camera. So yeah, this one's got obviously the best camera that you can get at the moment for micros, which is just super. The tune feels good. Got a very similar tune to the Lizard, which is also a 3S capable machine. Wow. It is windy out here, but it's handling it. Don't seem to have any brownouts or flips of death or anything like that, which is super, despite it just having a JST connector. This one's nippy. I've probably gone a little bit too high on the digital idle because I'm noticing when it's upside down, not a lot of air time. So I might bring that down. I think I stuck it at 7%, which might be a little bit too high for a 3S. So I'll get and change that. Well, I'm not hearing the beeper go off at the top of the throttle. So we may have a fairly efficient machine here. Look at it getting blown around by the wind though. It's just ridiculous, the weather that we've been having. Which is why there hasn't been so much content on the channel. I have to wait for the rain to stop, which it doesn't. Luckily these models can fly in pretty horrendous wind conditions these days. I really like how this one flies. Right, let's come in for a landing, see if I can do some FPV with it. So here is some FPV footage taken from the DVR of my Fatshark Dominator HD3s. And for the FPV flight, I've reduced the digital idle speed down to 5. So I initially bumped it up to 7, and I tend to overcompensate on the digital idle speed these days, ever since I found out that lifting it up fixes 90% of the flips of death issues that we get with these micros. And that is because the ESCs actually force the motor to slow down when we do these fast rolls and flips, and if the idle speed is too low, then one of the motors can actually stop, and that can cause the model to flip until the motor spools back up again, if it ever does. So yeah, it's working fine at 5 and will probably work fine at 4.5, which is the stock figure. But yeah, I tend to mess around with that these days to ensure that I don't get any flips of death. So next I want to talk about the tune. I felt like I got a pretty good tune out of it, but you need to bear in mind that the weather conditions were terrible here. According to Google, the winds were gusting from 30 miles per hour to 50 miles per hour, and I definitely felt it because the quad wasn't moving forward very quickly, but it didn't really affect the tune, I didn't think. So yeah, I'll give you my PIDs here, but I can't guarantee that they won't be as good in calmer conditions. They are very similar to the Lizard though, and that flew really well. It's another 3S model. I tend to find that you need to reduce the gains when you stick 3-cell batteries on models. And I would say be very careful of sticking a 3S on this model. So it's got the same ESCs as the Awesome series, which specifically said just use a 2S on there. And these are high KV motors, and they were getting very warm inside. It's 9 degrees outside, so it's sort of self-cooling. Everything comes down cool when you're flying in 9 degrees Celsius temperatures. So the next thing I want to talk about is the camera quality. Now, we all know that the Micro Swift is the best camera to go on these micros. It's CCD. However, I found that the camera wasn't as beneficial on this model as it is on other models, and it's down to the VTX. So when I flew the Awesome F100, I noticed I was getting some artifacts on the screen. A couple of black lines where the camera was overexposed, and I thought maybe it was the CMOS camera, but it's not. It's this VTX. And it's proved to me that if you want to use a higher quality CCD camera, then you are actually going to need to use a higher quality VTX as well. So you can kind of forgive the quality of this VTX when it's using a CMOS camera, and the quality is better with this CCD. But one of the questions I get asked on the channel is, why do I always fly in the same spot? And the answer is simple. It's very easy to compare all of the other models. So I can cut in footage from the EX90 here, which has got the Swift on a micro, and it's also using a better VTX. Or I can cut in the F100, which is using this same VTX but with a CMOS camera, and the quality just isn't as good. So I think that's where the saving has been made with this model. There's no soldering, so everything is plug and play, and the board is integrated. So yeah, I imagine that that's where the money has been saved. So it's quite easy to complain about the EX90 being nearly £200, and yeah, that's a lot more, but they have spent more on the components, and with this CCD camera it seems that we need that. That being said, I still think this is a great package. It's probably one of the cheapest packages out there running a CCD camera, so I still think it's a great model, and the reception's pretty good. It's just that the clarity and quality with the Swift camera isn't as good if you were to pair it with, I don't know, say the full speed TX200, which when paired with the Micro Swift just gives a fantastic result. So yeah, the flight time, I was getting around about 4 minutes with this 3-cell battery. The amp draw wasn't too bad, but I definitely need to get some better batteries. So the first flight was done with the camera angle at the stock angle, and the second flight I've moved the camera forward so you can get a bit more speed. That's something that's really good about it. So I would say, yeah, add a buzzer to it, and also move the battery to the bottom so you get better reception. The VTX, not as good as some other higher end models, but still usable. Of course, you can go into the Micro Swift and mess around with the image settings, but they don't give you the controller to do that, so you'd have to get the controller separate. I did have a look in the camera settings, and they did just seem to be stock settings, but really the VTX needs to be a little bit better, and that would be difficult to modify because the VTX is built into the board, and therefore all of the traces for the video out are built into the board as well. So I don't know whether you'd have to cut some traces or whether there's some solder pads on the board that can bypass the VTX. But anyways, if you are buying this as a ready to fly, you probably don't want to mess about with all that. And it's a bit of a shame that the receiver came dead out of the box, but again, that's more down to this receiver. I have seen it before in the past. Probably about 1 in 10 of these receivers has died out of the box, so there's that to bear in mind. Another thing I want to mention about this model as well is you should find that it's the cheapest on GearBest at the moment. So GearBest have been asking a lot of feedback from me personally, and I basically said that your prices need to be better than Banggood's without coupons. So hopefully now if you check a lot of their products, it should be less than Banggood's price. They're still working on that. And I also mentioned that their customer service needs to have better communication, and their shipping needs improving as well. So it's great that they're taking that stuff on board. Anyway, I'll put a link in the description if you want to check this one out. And as always, thanks so much for watching. Please continue to subscribe. Cheers.